Take it from there.
All right, we are now live. This is our first Swing Catalyst webinar since the lockdown last year. So it's been about a year since we've done these. Thank you everyone for joining us. If you didn't join us last year on our webinar series, those webinars are all available online. So we have one with Martin. Martin and I did one. I forget who else was on that one. Martin, do you remember?
Yeah, I think it was in May last year, June.
Yeah, and it was with, who else was on it with us? I forget.
Guillaume?
Oh, Guillaume, right. And was, I feel like there was a third person. Oh, wasn't it David Bertoli in Singapore or no?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Singapore,
so that was one of them.
Paris, Nuremberg, and Los Angeles.
That was quite the international webinar, but we're really excited for this one. Martin Stecher and Ted Long. Ted was one of our newest users there in Germany, had the plate for a little while, has been using it for quite a bit, and really excited to hear your thoughts on the plate and how it's working out for you. And you know, lots of years of golf knowledge going into to using that plate, which is great. I love different eyes being able to see those numbers and see where it takes them in terms of their teaching. So really excited to chat with you in a little bit. Where we are going to start though is just with a little introduction. So our plan is to basically do about 15 minutes each. And I'm going to start with a little introduction on Swing Catalyst here. So for those of you who don't speak German, unfortunately, or don't speak English, unfortunately, I do not speak German. And so, yeah, Ted will do the sign language for you. But hopefully you can get a little bit out of this, and we will, but Martin and Ted will be speaking in German, so you'll be able to get that information. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen here and go into my slides. All right, so what I'm going to start with is an introduction to Swing Catalyst products. So there's a wide range of Swing Catalyst products, and that's what a lot of our users really like, because they can get into the system at any price point pretty much. So we can start with simple video cameras and software launch monitor integration. So our software has been around for a really long time. A lot of people say it's one of the best in the business at just doing simple video analysis of golf swings. It has all the tools that you would ever need to analyze swings with video. You can sync up to 4 cameras in our software. And the launch monitor integration is a really cool feature too, because I know a lot of teachers who have the video on their phone and the launch monitor on their iPad, and when somebody leaves and comes back, you know, a week, a month, a couple of days later, it's hard to know what swing went with what launch conditions, and I think that's pretty important. So software and cameras is where a lot of people get into the company or start their journey with Swing Catalyst. Then we can move on to a balance plate, which is a pressure plate. And so it's really important for our golf instructors and for our clients to know the difference between pressure and force. Pressure is only perpendicular to the surface of the plate, so it's only kind of in a vertical direction. And it also gives us a lot of cool images. So you can see here, we have kind of the heat maps on the floor of the feet. And that's because all the little individual pressure sensors, there's 2,048 of them on top of our balance plate, allow us to see the hot points, because pressure again is force divided by area. So it measures those hot points underneath the foot and allows you to see what part of the foot is pushing into the ground, which can be really important in golf instruction. And we'll talk about, you know, how a lot of the pressure data is used. Then we have our 3D motion plate. It used to be our top end product, which is a combination of pressure and force. So it has the pressure plate on top of a 3D force plate. And so remember, the pressure plate just measures those vertical forces, but now we can see the side-to-side shearing, the forward and back shearing, and the twisting forces between the feet and the ground, which gives us a ton of information about how the golfer is using the ground. And those were our products for many years until very recently, when we've released our dual force plate, which I know Martin now has set up in his facility. And the dual force plates now give us the exact same information that we got off the single force plate. So it gives us the combined forces produced by both feet, but it also gives us the individual contributions of each foot. So we're going to really see how each golfer is using each foot independently. And with all the research that we've been doing recently on the dominant leg and how your dominant leg affects how you use the ground in golf, this is going to be some really interesting information that we're going to learn from using these dual plates. And as of right now, the dual plates are only force plates. And to understand the difference, you know, the force plates can give you an individual center of pressure. So it can give you that little dot there and that little dot there. And it can give you a total center of pressure and a center of pressure curve. It can also tell you how much force is on each foot relatively, and then the stance width. But what it can't give you are these little heat maps that come from the pressure plates. And the pressure plates are super important because if you see those little dot in space, you don't know if that's your toe, your heel, the outside of your foot, the inside of your foot. So it's hard to make a lot of educated guesses about what part of the foot is in contact with the plate if we don't have a pressure plate. And again, Swing Catalyst has a patent on using pressure and force together. And so eventually when the pressure plates are released, which is coming very soon, we're gonna have dual motion plates where you're gonna get the individual forces and pressures off each foot. And so they'll have the pressure plate on top of the force plate. So we'll get back to producing a pressure image like this, along with the individual forces from each foot. Also, a really exciting coming product is going to be 3D markerless motion capture. So your Swing Catalyst cameras will be able to measure in 3D where the human being is in space, or calculate basically where that human being is in space, and know where the center of mass is, and know how we're moving our pelvis and our trunk around. And so that's super exciting, and all that will be integrated with all the force information. We were talking just briefly about it, Ted. It's going to be really important to have good contrast between the person and the background. So the way you set up your studio, and obviously, you know, the cameras won't be able to move around too much, but really exciting, some of the new things that are coming in Swing Catalyst. And if you have some questions about that, you can talk to our two salespeople. Carl is in Europe and the rest of the world. So if you are not in the United States, you can email Carl at swingcatalyst.com. And if you're in the US, email Tim at swingcatalyst.com.
Just to ask a quick question,
Sure.
you probably need 3 cameras for that new motion capture system?
You only need 2, so it can do it with 2. But as you add more cameras, the data gets much better. So if you add a third, like a butt cam, basically, and then if you add a fourth, which I know Martin has above the head, which he uses for club fitting quite a bit, then the data gets much better from there. So yeah, you can integrate up to 4, and as you add more and more cameras and the model gets more and more information, it gets much better. Awesome. So this is the information we get from our balance plate. It gives us a lot of really valuable information that we can really use to help golfers. The thing that I look at most of the time at the start as a golfer hits is where their balance is on their feet. Because you can see that this golfer here has a lot more red in their heel than they do in their toe. So their pressure is a lot more towards their heel than their toe. And that happens quite a bit where people get unbalanced at setup, where they feel like they're balanced, but they're not actually very balanced. And so this is something that we look at quite a bit, and it's hard, it would be impossible to know that this person's more in their heel than their toe if you just had this little dot, because you don't know where the foot is in space. So that's the real value of pressure plates, is being able to see exactly what part of the foot's in contact with the ground, which really can give you some ideas about why the motion that they're producing or the forces that they're producing is happening. Then we get the stance width. This is a very simple thing to change and can create lots of big changes in a golfer's swing. So, you know, just making them have their feet a little closer together or a little further apart and being able to document how far the feet are apart can be a very powerful change you can make in somebody's swing. Then we have the percentage of pressure on each foot, and we can track that throughout the swing. One point that I've found to be really important is the maximum amount of pressure that the golfer gets into their trail side. This is something that the best players in the world are super consistent about. I always tell the story. I had Tommy Fleetwood on our plate at the Players Championship in Florida, and we had him hit 3 wedges, 3 7-irons, and 3 drivers, all like full speed normal shots. And he was within 1 or 2% of this maximum right pressure every single swing. So this is something that we've learned a lot about, and it's something that I think can really help determine the types of motions that come out of your golf swing. And so being consistent and knowing what your ideal max right pressure shift is really important. If you want to learn some more about all this stuff, I'm just going to kind of glance over it today because I only have 15 minutes. We do have a level 2 online certification class on our website. So if you go to the Swing Catalyst website, you can find that. There's a level 1 that's free online, and level 2 that there's a small fee to get that information. So tons more of education if you're interested to look on the Swing Catalyst website and find that. And then we have the individual center of pressures in each foot, and then the total center of pressure. And I've really become interested in this little thin gray line here and where it points kind of in the mid to late downswing, because you'll find some people that get in their trail foot heel and their lead foot toe, and that line starts pointing out there. That really tends to produce a more into outer rightward swing direction or path. And then if you get somebody in their trail foot toe and their lead foot heel, and that line is pointing more in this direction, that has a big trend towards producing a more leftward swing direction or path. So controlling where this line goes in space with pressure is a really good way to try to control swing direction, which is something we can do easily. Martin, we're not live on Facebook.
Yep, still
Carl,
not.
no, Carl told me we are live on Facebook, but I don't know what's happening with that. I know Carl's hearing us, so I'm guessing it's working. So hopefully it's working on Facebook. Maybe you just have to refresh your Facebook there. I'm sure Carl will tell me here if we're not live on Facebook. So there are some people monitoring.
Can you tell me one thing real quick, Scott?
Yeah, for sure.
If I look at the forward foot,
Yeah.
The dot is in the middle, right?
Yeah.
Now look at that other foot; it's towards the heel. Is that basing it? How does it do that? Because I mean, does it do it like a net center? How does it do that?
It's trying to find a balance point. So I always think of it as like a teeter-totter, right? So if I have a teeter-totter, or what do you got? Do you guys call it a teeter-totter in German? I don't know.
It's called a Wippe auf Deutsch.
Okay, perfect. And so you would imagine here, there's a lot more weight on this end. So if you have a bigger person on the teeter-totter and a smaller person, obviously you move the center closer to the bigger person, so that balances out. So yeah, that's basically where the foot kind of balances around. And yeah, if you get more in the heel, it'll move towards the heel. If you get more in the toe, it'll move towards the toe. All right, let's just see here. Let's make sure we are still going on Facebook. Okay, Tom's telling me to just continue. Okay, I'm recording it, so we should be all good here. Hopefully the live people can get on in a second. And so this is all really valuable information, and having this information along with the force data can become super important. But if you'll remember, the balance plate information is only what's perpendicular to the surface. And if you watch this video that I show in a lot of my seminars, golf swings are not just pushing straight down, right? We have a lot of ways we use the ground with our feet that are not just straight down, and that's why we need a force plate to measure them. And so if you watch this video, this is one that I show all the time. I'm sure most people have seen it, but this shows you how there's a lot of other interactions with the ground that our feet have to produce to have a golf swing happen. And you'll see here those forward and backward shearing forces that golfers have to produce to create a golf swing or create rotation. And you'll see this guy on the ice, since there's no friction between his feet and the ground on the ice, you see his feet slip. And
always make that example. I wish I need to get that video. I will
send it to you, sir. Yeah, I will send it to you.
I tell people, if you ever had to hit the ball off the ice with your socks, you'd be very well aware of how your interaction with the ground is important. In this guy's case, he obviously got a 1 penalty stroke because he's in the water.
Clearly, the ball went in too. What I find really interesting about this, and this is something you can learn a lot more about in our education series, like most people see what his feet do, right? You see his trail foot slip backwards and his lead foot slip forwards, and they watch him fall and they think that's really interesting. But what I was really interested in when I saw this was where his low point was. And if you'll notice, he hits at about a foot fat. So that's where he hit the ice right behind the ball. And what we know from our interaction with the ground is we have 3 forces. We go side to side, we go rotational, and we go vertical. And your vertical force is a big club shallower. And so his feet slipped, and we know that the sequence that we use those forces is horizontal first, rotational second, and vertical third. And since his feet slipped out during the rotational component of that, he was not able to produce that vertical force and shallow out his club, and he hit it really fat. So if you understand your kinetic sequence, why he hit it fat makes a lot of sense. And then if you have a lot of golfers who are hitting it fat, that could be a way to help them if you understand how to kind of improve their vertical force and make it happen somewhat sooner. And so these are the 3 forces. The first force we always look at is the horizontal or the right-left force. So this is the force directed towards or away from the target. And there's always a big spike of horizontal force somewhere around the top of the backswing. And this is where the golfer, you can see this golfer is pushing down and away from the target, and these reaction forces are acting up and towards the target. And so since both of these forces are leaning towards the target, there's a net force trying to shove his pelvis towards the target and to produce horizontal motion or glide. Some people will call it sway, that kind of thing. But what's really important with the horizontal motion is we're able to turn on the brakes after we put on that horizontal motion. So you'll see here, he is now turning on the brakes, and now those forces, when he gets down to impact, are acting backwards or away from the target. And so that net force, since both of these forces are acting backwards, is actually slowing his pelvis down or stopping it from moving forward. And that braking force is something I've become very interested in recently, because the most braking force I've ever measured on the swing catalyst motion plate comes in the fastest swinger basically on the planet right now. So Kyle Berkshire, who won the World Long Drive contest the last time it was held, I believe in 2019, produces 37% of his body weight, or almost 80 pounds of horizontal braking force. So he's really efficient at throwing on the brakes, which is, I think, what gives that club all its momentum. So slowing down your body and then transferring that energy to the club, really important. You'll find a lot of amateur golfers really struggle with that horizontal braking force.
I'd just like to add one thing to that video.
Sure.
If you go back to it, and people should understand that.
Which video? The guy on the ice?
No, this guy here.
Oh, right here. Okay.
Berkshire. If you look at his horizontal force, you see how it's got all those different ups and down peaks in it and stuff. People got to understand there's a settling process that people go through, moving back and forth before they get set.
Right.
It's really more important what your peaks are like, not really how you get there. Some people are able to stand very still and turn, and it looks nice and smooth.
Yeah.
But what's happening to him is, if you ever seen him swing, he bounces left, he bounces right, und so weiter. Auf Deutsch, das heißt, this thing here sieht so put the arrow on the top thing there.
Like right here?
Das Ding da sieht so unrund aus, weil der Kyle Berkshire neigt, links und rechts hin und her zu springen, ein bisschen Momentum in den Schwung reinzubringen, weil hat selber gesagt, hat ein besseres Gefühl, sein Gewicht nach hinten zu verlagern, wenn erst nach vorne kommt. I was talking about how he likes to jump left to remind himself to jump back.
Right. And that's, you can see that negative force down here where he's rocking back and forth off his foot. And then this is kind of where he takes the club weight. Yeah, exactly. And that's something he's become much more efficient at doing, is that back and forth forces. Because we had measured him a long time ago and he had a very little horizontal force. And I think that rocking back and forth allowed him to add a lot of the horizontal force to his torque and his vertical, which are really high, which allows him to create all that speed. So our next force is going to be, then we have Brian Gay. So luckily through his coach, Joe Mayo, who is out of Las Vegas in the United States here, he's worked with Joe Mayo. So he's worked with Brian Gay quite a bit, and we've been able to work with him a little bit. And you could see that this was, I believe, around 2014, where he was swinging his driver at 105 miles per hour, which is very slow for a PGA Tour player. And you could see the very lacking of horizontal braking forces. I was fortunate enough to work with him again right before the pandemic hit. This was 2020 February, and you can see he's now added 10% more braking forces, and now his club head speed is up in a little bit more respectable range, kind of near the tour average there at 112. And so this is something that, you know, there's probably some physical training they've done in the gym. There's probably some swing modifications they've created that's allowed him to turn on the brakes a little more and allowed him to create a lot more speed.
Another thing too you can notice is, if you go back to there, is his torque's not that high, because if you look at his left leg, he's not really working up and out of the ground to create the torque. So that's why his torque forces are not really that high.
Yeah, you can see that his vertical is kind of his dominant ground reaction force. So it's the one that's the biggest one. Yeah, that's interesting. And that's something we look at all the time when we look at the 3 ground reaction forces, to see which one you're dominant at. And what Swing Catalyst puts are these little black bands here, so that we can see how much you're producing relative to the tour average. So the middle of the black band is the tour average, top of the black band +1 standard deviation, bottom of the black band -1 standard deviation. And so that just gives you an idea of how much is a lot of that force and how much is a little of that force. And you can see this one goes way above the tour average, so that would be his dominant ground reaction force.
Und für die Leute, die zuschauen, das ist bezüglich auf dein Gewicht. Das heißt, ein Mensch, der nicht viel Gewicht hat und dreht sich viel, könnte ganz da oben sein. Das heißt nicht unbedingt, dass mehr Kraft erzeugt. Es ist nur bezüglich sein Körpergewicht. I just was saying that it's relative to your body weight and not pure actual newtons. She's
exactly.
A little girl who could turn really well isn't creating more force than Kyle Berkshire, just relative to her body.
Relative to her body, yeah. So you'll find even like, you know, I've had a 90-pound little boy on here that was producing, 200% his body weight in vertical force. So it's possible. It's not like club head speed where, some people will never get to the average of club head speed, tour average, but yeah, relative to your body, you can generally get these forces up there if they're needed for your swing. So then we have our torque force, and our torque force is that twisting force. And you'll notice if we look down the line at these ground reaction forces coming out of each foot, that one's pointing backwards, which is the one coming out of your trail foot, and one's pointing forward, which is the one coming out of your lead foot or your front foot. And so the one that's leaning backwards is going to shove your trail hip backwards. The one that's leaning forward is going to shove your lead hip forward and create that backswing rotation of your swing. So you'll see a little negative dip in the torque in the early backswing. And then in the downswing, we do the opposite. So most people have seen a trail foot slip, you know, like Greg Norman. I was watching him on TV in some old tournament yesterday, and his trail foot would slip away from the target quite a bit. His foot would slip back this way. That's because he's pushing into the ground backwards to allow that trail hip to come forward. The lead foot's actually pushing into the ground backwards to cause that, or forward, sorry, to allow that lead hip to go backwards. And so that creates the downswing rotation, the feet pushing in opposite directions like we saw in the guy on the ice there. And so I always show this little diagram or this little video that somebody posted on, I forget where, Instagram or something, to show the difference between a horizontal ground reaction force and a torque ground reaction force. So both of these golfers are swinging on these little foam rollers. They have foam rollers underneath their feet. So clearly, if I push down and away from the target, these things will push back up and towards the target. But if I push forwards and backwards on these little things, they might slip out. So I would argue that one of these golfers is primarily a horizontal swinger and one of them is primarily a torque swinger. And you have to see who's who based on this video. So you can see this guy can produce something that looks like a golf swing, doesn't have much brakes, but that's okay. This girl cannot produce anything that looks like a golf swing because her dominant force production pattern is torque. So you see how her feet slip forward and backwards as she's doing this more to the ground. His feet, he kind of pushes more this way to go towards the target and create more horizontal force.
I guarantee you one thing, you only did that once with her.
Yeah. Yeah,
this didn't tell her what was coming.
Exactly. I'm sure she said that was enough. She didn't do it again. And if she did get better at this, our hypothesis is her golf swing would get way worse because you're taking away her dominant force production pattern. So because your first goal of a human is to stay upright and not hurt herself. And so she probably would stop producing torque if she got better at this drill, which would take away her main ground reaction force in the golf swing. And finally is our vertical force. This is the one where we're jumping off the ground. You can see Justin Rose here creates 177% of his body weight in vertical force. The most vertical force I've ever measured off a single foot is this long drive guy who produced 1,788 newtons of vertical force, which equates to about 182 kilograms. So there's a lot of forces going through the ground with these guys that are hitting it a long ways. For those of us in the US, that's about 400 pounds of vertical force. Justin James, the long drive guy, was able to produce 301% of his body weight. And if you think about that, he's probably about 100 kilograms, I would say. And so he's producing 300 kilograms of vertical force in his swing off both feet. We're going to do some work with him again in a couple of weeks. So I'll have some more data from Kyle Berkshire to learn some more about how these guys are producing this incredible speed. And I think what the important thing is for those of you who use these plates is really just tuning these individual forces to each golfer. So this animation came from one of our ambassadors in Sweden. His name is Eric Blomqvist. And this is how he uses the plate in his instruction. So I would equate it to music. So if I want to tune my guitar or I wanted to tune an amplifier to me singing, I have to turn one knob up and one down and one up or whatever. It's not just cranking them all up full speed. And so then if Ted got up to try to sing, he'd probably need to adjust these a little bit differently for him to sound good. And that's the exact way that people need to use these plates in their golf instruction, is to do some assessments on the golfer, figure out what their dominant force production pattern is, and try to tune these golfers, because sometimes they might be producing too much force and you need to turn it down and then turn up another one. And then you hit it. And how do you decide if it sounds good in golf? Well, you got your launch monitor, right? Or you got how the ball flew. That'll tell you whether you're getting closer or further away from what kind of ground reaction force pattern works for that individual. So again, that was sorry, go ahead.
I'm kind of interested, I'll say it in German, ich freue mich auf Martins Präsentation, weil ist ein Fitter und das Ziel ist natürlich, das meisten rauszuholen, wenn man versteht, wie man einen Schläger schwingt oder wo man das Kraft erzeugt. Und das hat viel damit mit dem Schaft zu tun, oder?
Sehr viel, sehr viel. Schaft ist das Wichtigste dabei.
Exactly. I was just saying that, you know, I'd be interested to get his insights on how he fits people, because once he knows on how they use the ground and the forces, he can then apply how the shaft loads and unloads. And most people don't even realize that, you know. That is so important. And I said, that's something that's really interesting, because if you think about it, I'm pushing 90 now. So
you look good. for your
I did. You know, I played my first round of golf with Gene Saracen, and he's the guy that really got me going. But but the thing is, when I was teaching Mort Lampert, und ich sag's auf Deutsch, als ich mit Mort Lampert und Max Kiefer zusammen auf der Range war, die zwei, die haben ganz unterschiedliche Schwünge und die gehen mit dem Schaf ganz unterschiedlich um. Und dann habe ich beiden gesagt, okay, du schlägst jetzt einen Ball mit seinem Schläger, er schlägt mit deinem Driver, hin und her. Der eine hat einen Ball 500 Meter hoch links, der andere 500 Meter hoch rechts. Und ich sage, jetzt musst du dir vorstellen, das ist der einzige Schläger, den es gibt, und du musst Golf damit spielen. And that's what life was like before there was fitting. There was one club, okay, and all those good-looking guys, oh, he's got a great-looking swing. Of course he does. The club fits to it. All of us other guys that look like, you know, coal miners, we were trying to get along with a club that wasn't made for us. And that's where Martin should have been born earlier. So I wouldn't have been so frustrated in life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I would say the same story.
Why'd you break all those clubs, Ted? They deserved it.
And I would say the same story for golf instruction. I think a lot of times golf instructors like knew how they swing or knew how the best in the world was swinging at the time. Like, I mean, when I was growing up, it was the mid 90s when Tiger Woods was the model, and you tried to make everybody look like Tiger Woods, and you know, that wasn't the best for everyone. So getting the personal shaft in your body that fits you the best, getting the personal swing that fits your body the best, it is what we're learning now with the technology, how to dial that in for each individual, because obviously every individual is different. Martin, you are now the host of this meeting, so you can take over, share your screen, and talk about your club fitting.
Yeah, will do. So, dann wechsle ich natürlich jetzt in Deutsch. Wie das ja auch angekündigt war, werde ich das jetzt alles in der Sprache machen. Ich habe in meinem kleinen, jetzt haben wir es 26, 15 Minuten ungefähr werde ich jetzt machen. Da wir noch nicht live sind, gibt es natürlich nicht so viele Fragen, die entsprechend reinkommen. Hat Karl auch gerade was auf Facebook geschrieben, dass nachher die Aufzeichnung dann auf jeden Fall live gestellt wird. Ja, Tag erstmal aus Nienburg, das ist ja erstmal das Wichtigste. Ich freue mich, wenn das nachher viele Leute dann angucken oder vielleicht geht es ja auch noch live. Swing Catalyst, und mein Themengebiet ist heute Fitting, Club Fitting. Sowohl mit dem Video wie mit den Druckmessplatten, wie auch mit den Dual-Force-Platten, die ich alle hier habe und eben aus ein paar Jahren Praxis jetzt was dazu erzählen kann. Bisschen zu mir, ich bin jetzt seit 2009 im Markt mit Golf, war früher mal bei der Bundeswehr als Offizier, habe ein bisschen Maschinenbau 6 Trimester in Hamburg an der Universität studiert. Da denke ich, habe ich einen ganz guten Mechanik- und sonstigen Background, was diese Sachen angeht. Kräfte, solche Sachen als Ingenieur, Mathematik, Mechanik hilft natürlich sehr im Verständnis. Bis zur Major-Reserve bin ich noch gekommen. Anschließend bin ich in die Informatik gegangen, staatlich geprüfter Informatikassistent, Fachrichtung Wirtschaft nannte sich das damals, und habe mich dann auch selbstständig gemacht als IT-Berater, habe Datenbankprogrammierung gemacht und Data Scientist nenne ich das mal, Data Mining, Planungssysteme, Szenarien rechnen und all solche Dinge. So ein bisschen Number Crunchen gab es vor 30 Jahren schon, wird heute nur im größeren Stil gemacht. Ja, und was unten steht, ist, glaube ich, der wichtigste Satz: Ich bin ziemlich golfverrückt. Nachdem ich selber irgendwann angefangen habe, und lernen, immer wissbegierig sein. Es gibt immer was Neues rauszufinden. Tägliche Beobachtungen, viel online, durch natürlich so eine Crew, wie wir sie hier jetzt online haben, mit Scott, mit Ted und vielen anderen. Da leben wir alle vom Austausch, und das macht natürlich wahnsinnig Spaß und ist sehr effizient. Ich habe mal nachgeguckt, 2013 habe ich meine erste Swing Catalyst Lizenz bekommen. Reines Videosystem, aber damals schon mit 4 Kameras. Das war mir wichtig, nicht nur für Rechts- und Linkshänder muss ich nichts umbauen, Down the Line natürlich Face-On, aber auch vor allen Dingen Top-Down, ist insgesamt, glaube ich, eine sehr unterschätzte Position, macht Sinn, und bei Swing Catalyst ist das Gute, dass ich halt sehr flexibel bin in dem Einsatz und Stück für Stück halt auch das wachsen lassen kann. Dann habe ich 2015 die Balance Plate, Pressure Plate, noch die erste Version, damals mit 100 Hertz. Inzwischen sind ja die nächsten Versionen mit 135 Hertz auf dem Markt. Das heißt, anstatt 100 Mal pro Sekunde wird jetzt 135 Mal gemessen bei den Dingen. Dann habe ich 2016 das erweitert mit der 3D Force Plates, das, was Scott vorhin auch vorgestellt hat, so dass es insgesamt eine Platte ist. Und Anfang des Jahres habe ich weltweit die erste Installation der Swing Catalyst Dual Force Plates bekommen und ja, entdecke viel Neues. Nicht nur eben im Club-Fitting, das ist das eine, aber natürlich auch, wenn es um Coaching geht, Schwungoptimierung. Ich bin ein bisschen spezialisiert auf Speed und Kräfte, was das angeht. Und da gibt es wirklich ganz, ganz, ganz viel zu entdecken. Am Abschlag, an meinem Hauptabschlag, wo es also um das Fitting der Schläger geht, Driver, Eisen, Wedges, Hybrids, was man sich so vorstellen kann, alles außer Putter, das ist bei mir extra, nutze ich die 4 Highspeed-Kameras. Und weil ich erst 2 hatte und kurz danach 2 andere gekauft habe, das ist auch, gibt es glaube ich nur bei Swing Catalyst, konnte ich die halt weiter kombinieren. Ich war also nicht darauf angewiesen, ich muss genau ein Modell haben, sondern Swing Catalyst unterstützt sehr viele Kameramodelle, die ich dort eben habe. Die Dual Force Plate und natürlich Trackman. Ich habe noch einen GC Quad, jede Menge Sachen, um halt Indoor, gerade mit dem Quad, auch Spin und andere Daten sauber zu erfassen. Driver Fitting und andere Dinge sind sonst nicht sauber möglich. Wenn man nicht genau Launch Angle und vor allem Spin-Achse sieht, dann ist das alles relativ witzlos, was das Ganze eben macht. Im Club-Fitting ist es für mich die Entscheidung gewesen dazu, dass ich professionelle Kameras zwingend benötige. Professionelle Kameras ermöglichen überhaupt erst, sich schnelle Objekte sauber darzustellen. Smartphones, egal wie sie heißen, von welchem Hersteller und auch viele andere Film- und Videokameras haben ein Problem, die, wenn ein Bild gemacht wird, die machen auch bei 240 Bildern pro Sekunde. Ich habe es letztes Jahr in kalifornischen Sonne probiert, beim Teil des Performance Institute mal wieder doch nochmal so einen Schaft vernünftig aufzunehmen. Das ist nicht möglich, gerade nicht aus der Sicht von vorne. Das wird von oben nach unten abgetastet in der Regel. Wenn der Schaft erst hier ist, wird abgetastet, dann ist der Schaft weiter, weiter, weiter. Dann sieht man oft so Bananen auf den Videos, Nudelschäfte, selbst mit Stiff, X-Stiff oder anderen Dingen. Das passiert in der Realität nicht. Ich kann nur sagen, probiert es mal aus, Smartphone 180 Grad drehen, dann wird andersrum abgetastet oder auch 90 Grad zur Seite. Dann sieht das nämlich plötzlich anders aus, was der Schaft macht. Also man kommt nicht drum herum, in diese professionellen Kameras zu investieren. Die sind noch nicht mal teuer, dreistelliger Bereich in Euros inzwischen. Das ist, ja, Smartphone ist oft teurer, als was das Ganze angeht. Das ist, man kann es ja mal nachlesen, die sogenannten Rolling Shutter Thematiken.
Ich weiß in Zukunft übrigens, wen ich jetzt anrufe.
Ja, ja.
Carl, if you're listening, I'm calling Martin now. I'm not calling you anymore. This guy really needs to stop. I mean, my God, I'm sick of hearing all this stuff. I go, man, why did I meet this guy before?
Wir werden mal sehen, du. Gerne, Ted. Guck mal weiter, was das alles so gibt. Dann müssen wir uns mal verabreden dafür. Sehr, sehr gerne. Freue mich drauf.
Du kennst dich gut aus, mein lieber Mann.
Warten wir mal ab, kommt noch einiges jetzt. Also das nächste ist, dass wenn ich jetzt Videos mache, ich gehe gleich mal in Swing Catalyst rein, dass ich sozusagen Droop und Deflection während des Schwungs sehe. Also Ted hat vorhin Load, Unload, egal wie man es nennt, der Schaft ist ja in Bewegung. Der bleibt nie starr. Das ist halt eins der Punkte, zeige ich gleich. Genauso natürlich Leihwinkelanalyse aus dem Schaftverhalten und Schwung. Sieht man auf Kameras. Der Trackman bietet inzwischen solche Daten natürlich auch, was eben auch sehr cool ist. So, jetzt schalte ich mal eben um. So, ich habe jetzt mal hier Swing Catalyst. Das sollte eigentlich ganz gut jetzt zu sehen sein hier. Und wir gehen mal, ich nehme mal einen Driver-Schwung. Und das ist jetzt ein Schaft, das der Georg Schultes spielt. Pro Golf Tour, glaube ich, gerade, demnächst nochmal Porsche European Open. Und man sieht dann, was diese Schäfte machen. Und hier sieht man das, glaube ich, sehr gut, wie groß hier entsprechend diese Auslenkung ist in diesen Bereichen. Und das ist das, was ich mir anschaue. Dann haben wir es hier oben auch, geht nach unten weiter. Sehr gut oft zu sehen bei 90 Grad und natürlich auch hier im Treffmoment. Und wenn ich dann reingehe und sage, gucken wir mal, was macht denn dieser Schaft, dann zieht der sich jetzt so circa 7 cm runter. Das ist eine ganze Ecke. Das war jetzt ein sehr interessanter Schaft. Ich gehe nochmal in das Layout rein, nehme nochmal die anderen Positionen mit rein. Beim Wegnehmen sieht man das auch enorm, wie viel der sich hier verbiegt. Das ist ein Autoflex-Schaft, den haben wir mal getestet und für untauglich befunden, um es gleich mal zu sagen. Der ist in dem Segment hier weich wie wirklich eine gekochte Spaghetti. Autoflex macht gar nichts mit Autoflex aus unserer Sicht, was ich gesehen habe. Mit einem guten Rhythmus kriegt man den selbstverständlich geschlagen. Aber man sieht halt hier wirklich wunderbar, wie viel eigentlich so ein Schaft sich bewegt, wie groß diese Auslenkung ist. So, jetzt gehen wir weiter. Im Schwung nochmal nach oben. Und ich nutze immer zwei Begriffe, da gehe ich gleich nochmal drauf ein. Jetzt gehen wir nochmal top-down. Das sind auch Dinge, die man wirklich nur von oben oft sieht. Ist für mich eine sehr interessante Kameraperspektive, gerade wenn ich in den Übergang gehe. Wie viel, wenn ich hier beschleunige, der Schläger will noch ein Stück nach hinten, wird ja abgebremst, gibt Gas nach vorne. Wie weit geht er eigentlich hier rüber? Hier sieht man es nicht so richtig und auch down the line ist es oft nicht erkennbar. Zweites ist natürlich auch fürs Coaching super. Ich sehe eben, was macht wirklich, gerade wenn wir hier das zweifarbig haben, was macht die Hüfte tatsächlich, wie weit öffnen sich, welche Winkel, wo geht es entsprechend hin in dem Segment Fahrt und mehr Informationen. Droop und Deflection sind zwei Werte. Ich gehe noch mal ganz kurz rein. Fangen wir noch mal an mit Droop. Das ist jetzt mal bei mir aus dem Gearsystem. Wie weit zieht er sich runter, dieser Schaft? Ich kann das mit dem 3D-System natürlich messen. Das sind jetzt gute 57, irgendwas Millimeter. Und da gibt es halt gewisse Maße, die zeigen, das kann ich wirklich aus dem ganz normalen 2D-Videos dann ablesen. Ist es mehr oder weniger als das, die mir sagen, ist das ein vernünftiger Bereich? Deflection ist die Rechts-Links-Bewegung, wenn man von vorne guckt. Der Schaft hier macht jetzt sehr, sehr viel. Das ist auch kein Wunder. Martin Borgmeier mit 144 Meilen beschleunigt den doch etwas mehr, sodass wir hier in dem Fall 11 Zentimeter nach vorne eben haben.
Aber das kann sein, dass das dann ein Stiff-Shaft ist, oder?
Das war ein dreifach X-Stiff-Shaft.
Are you kidding me? Da soll nicht so viel essen, der Kerl.
Ja, das macht er auch. Die sind ja noch ein bisschen schneller geworden.
That's a Triple X Shaft, Scott.
Ja. Ja. Mhm. Und der kommt wieder ein bisschen zurück, wie alle Schäfte, die bremsen alle Richtung Treffmoment, gibt keinen Kick, aber geht halt eben in diesen Bereichen. So, wenn wir das haben, kann ich halt sagen, wie viel Schaftbiegung ist eigentlich gut? Gut in Anführungszeichen. Wir haben auch da immer nur etwas, wo man sagt, das ist ein Vorschlag, wenn man das macht. Es brauchen Leute mehr Auslenkung, um ihren Rhythmus zu finden, und manche brauchen etwas weniger in dem Bereich. Schaftbiegung in dem Übergang, in der Transition, 5 bis 7 Zentimeter, sage ich in dem Bereich. Eisen etwas weniger, Driver 7 bis 10 Zentimeter. Und wie gesagt, Top-Down-Kamera, die nutze ich dafür hauptsächlich, um zu sehen, was passiert. Nächster Punkt ist Schaft parallel im Abschwung. Was macht er dort? Dort sehe ich sehr gut, gerade bei 90 Grad, exakt, wie er in welche Richtung sich eben bewegt und kickt. Da schaue ich nochmal eben rein, andere Tastatur. Das ist in der Down-the-Line-Ansicht dann wiederum gut oft zu sehen. Gehen nochmal zurück. Wie viel macht er hier? Der schafft jetzt sehr wenig. In anderen Bereichen haben wir dann eben sehr viel mehr. Und im Treffmoment, Treffmoment, super. Kann ich nachher korrigieren. Im Treffmoment würde ich sagen, maximal bis 5 Zentimeter wäre eigentlich eine gute Idee. Und schauen wir nochmal beim Eisen. Nehmen nochmal die Linie raus. Gehen im Treffmoment. Wenn ich dann eine Linie, ist jetzt nicht ganz getroffen, ziehe und die geht ungefähr in die Mitte der Schlagfläche, dann habe ich diese 4 Zentimeter. Dann hat man meistens auch einen Schaft oder zumindest einen Bereich vom Schaft, der in Summe sehr gut funktioniert. Das ist so meine Erfahrung. Im Gears-System haben wir das auch mal gemessen. Ein Verhältnis von 2:1, also etwas weniger Deflection, 2-3 Zentimeter, wie es also nach rechts-links geht, und vielleicht so 4 bis 5 Zentimeter runter. Es ist weniger als das, ist oft, muss man gucken, woraus resultiert das. Wir haben natürlich auch viel mehr, gerade wenn stark von außen offene Schlagfläche kommt, gelöffelt wird, Hände gehen extrem hoch, dann habe ich oft mehr Droop. Da muss man den Schwung mit einberechnen. Aber das ist erstmal so eine Idee, wo ich, wenn ich auch ganz normaler Golflehrer draußen bin, sage ich, nutze das Videosystem in den Bereichen, einfach mal checken kann. Ist das so in dem Segment drin, was dort eben passiert? So. Ja. Das Zweite, was man ablesen kann in den Daten. Gehe nochmal in das Swing Catalyst-System rüber. Ist, dass ich schauen kann, wie viel Zeit verbringt eigentlich jemand im Abschwung. Ich kann hier Marker setzen, dass ich sage, ich habe jetzt den Bereich Umkehrpunkt des Schaftes und Treffmoment markiert. Ich habe eine schöne Anzeige, die mir sagt, Backswing 682 Millisekunden, Abschwung war 233. Ich muss natürlich die Marker sehr genau setzen. Rhythmus 2,9:1. Da gibt es ja dieses Tour-Tempo-Buch 3:1 als idealtypisch. Auch da gibt es natürlich größere Abweichungen, aber das ist erstmal die Idee dazu. Und immer wenn die Abschwungzeit wie hier in dem Bereich ist das jemand, der in der Regel schnell wieder unten ist. Mehr als 300 Millisekunden ist oft auch im Amateurbereich, manchmal 3,30, 3,40, viele bis 2,90 so in dem Bereich. Dann verbringe ich ja für dieselbe Strecke, die ich zurücklege, also sprich von hier oben in dem Bereich bis hier habe ich einen gewissen Weg und einen Beschleunigungsweg. Wenn ich denselben Weg in einer kürzeren Zeit zurückhebe, beschleunige ich, ist das Ding natürlich schneller, ist ganz klar. Wenn ich 100 Meter mit dem Auto fahre und bin da in 7 Sekunden oder in 4 Sekunden, dann muss ich natürlich schneller sein. Wenn ich schneller bin, wird hier mehr beschleunigt. Je schneller beschleunigt wird, umso härter und oft auch etwas schwerer ist es besser, den Schaft zu machen. Der mittlere Bereich würde ich so bis 260 Millisekunden und alles weniger als 260 Millisekunden ist sehr schnell und die Long Driver habe ich gemessen bis 180 Millisekunden runter. Das ist unvorstellbar schnell, was die machen. Es wäre ein Rätsel, wie ein Körper sowas hinkriegt. Meiner schafft es nicht, aber das ist schon gigantisch, was die dort machen. Und das ist dann so ein Punkt, wo wir oft haben, schneller Abschwung sind eher härtere und schwerere Schäfte. Und wenn ich dann einen Fall habe, dass jemand nicht weit ausholt, weil er sagt, ich habe eine Einschränkung oder Hockeyspieler oder was auch immer, ist aber dann auch relativ schnell unten. Dann kommt als Endgeschwindigkeit beim Eisen 7 vielleicht 70 Meilen an. Der beschleunigt aber das Ding wie jemand anders, wenn er die große Strecke hat, wie 85 oder 90 Meilen. Dann hat man zum Teil auch Leute mit 70 Meilen Schwunggeschwindigkeit mit einem schweren Stiff-Graphitschaft, Regular 110 Gramm Stahl, Stiff-Stahl, wie auch immer in den Bereichen, weil die einfach sehr viel Last auf einer kurzen Strecke in einer kurzen Zeit in den Schaft bringen. So dass ich inzwischen sagen kann, die Schwunggeschwindigkeit ist kein wirklich guter Indikator. Ich muss ein paar andere Sachen definitiv betrachten für Schafthärte. Sondern es ist immer die Art.
Loading and Unloading, oder wie du ist wichtiger.
Loading, Unloading, das ist auch Transition.
Wie er mit Energie umgeht. Du hast Leute zum Beispiel, die haben unheimlich viel Lag, die haben so einen Snap-Release. Dann hast du Leute, die eher den Schaft die ganze Zeit belasten, so langsamer. Das ist alles eine Funktion deren Scoring-Mechanismus. Und Leute, ich hab Leute zum Beispiel, wenn sie wirklich so spät schlagen, die brauchen teilweise Hilfe, dass der Schlägerkopf kommt, weil sonst ist die Schlagfläche zu offen.
Ja, ja. Also da gibt es sehr viel Zusammenhänge. Ist ein ganz spannendes Thema. Aber ich kann nur sagen, bitte nicht davon irritieren lassen, wenn jemand draußen sagt, ich habe mal einen härteren Schaft, aber die sagen alle, ich habe nicht genug Schwunggeschwindigkeit dafür, vergesst das, probiert es aus, geht zu einem Golfer, lasst euch das angucken. Wie geht ihr mit dem Ding denn um? Genau wie du sagst, Squaring, Unsquaring, elementar. Wie wird entwickelt, gemacht, wo wird wie viel Power halt reingegeben? Das ist völlig individuell, was da passiert. Die Sachen mit Rhythmus und Timing sind im Video natürlich noch einigermaßen erkennbar. Die globalen Daten, also die reine Zeitdauer. Was wir nicht sehen, das sind genau die Kurven, die wir vorhin schon sagten, wo ich sage, ich habe halt die Front-Back, ich gehe nochmal auf den Torque dazu. Wie ist dieses Timing? Wie hoch sind diese Kräfte? Was ist die dominante Kraft? Für mich aber interessiert ja in dem Bereich im Fitting nur eins. Ich mache dann nur Fitting. Es gibt nichts am Schwung. Ich kann die Leute nur so nehmen, wie sie sind und die Reaktion darauf betrachten, was passiert. Sonst kann man eigentlich aufhören, was da eben passiert.
Du hast schon Fälle gehabt, wo sie eine halbe Stunde lang den Ball getoppt haben.
Ich habe im Jahr bei 500 Sessions habe ich 2.
I just told myself at some point, and I've seen that with the guy next to us. you get after 20 minutes, the person's still topping the ball. And that has nothing to do with this fitting, obviously. But that's usually when I say, guy comes around the corner, Ted, do you have a minute?
You get a lesson out of that one, for sure.
Ja, wobei bei mir ist das Prinzip ganz klar, Fitting ist Fitting, Coaching, Training ist Training. Das muss man trennen, sonst brauche ich nicht mehr etwas zu machen. Wenn einer gar keinen Ball trifft, trinkt man am besten erstmal einen Kaffee und probiert es dann nochmal. Aber je mehr man in den Kopf geht
oder was anderes trinken.
Was auch immer, gucken wir mal, Milch geht auch. Können wir nochmal schauen. Was wir hier halt messen, ich nenne das die biomechanische Effizienz mit unterschiedlichen Schlägeroptionen. Wir haben halt Höhe und Timing der Kräfte. Das ist in dem Bereich, wann, wie, wo habe ich das, wann wird welche Sachen gemacht, wie sind die Bremskräfte und all diese Abteilungen. Und es gibt dann, wenn die Schäfte besser passen, sehe ich auch, dass sich diese Muster ändern. Auf dem Video ist das nicht zu erkennen. Die Schwünge sind erstaunlich konstant, auch bei den Amateuren. Ich habe ja alles da, vom Tourpro bis jemand, der 1-2 Jahre spielt. Aber die Reaktion auf die Schäfte ist schon sehr, sehr klar messbar. Und dann haben wir natürlich verschiedene Faktoren. Das Timing kann besser sein. Oft habe ich, wenn der besser mitgeht, also leichter bewegt werden kann, das passt mehr zu dem, was der Golfer machen möchte, wo er Kraft macht. Und der Schaft kommt dann endlich so mit an den richtigen Stellen. Sehe ich, dass weniger Kraft für die gleiche Geschwindigkeit aufgewandt werden muss, was natürlich eine gute Sache ist, höhere Effizienz. Oder auch für manche, die je nach Schwungtypus natürlich, die in der Lage sind, Speed zu machen, die können endlich mehr Power auch reinlegen und dann, ich sage denen das gar nicht, ich merke das plötzlich, habe ich die Schwunggeschwindigkeit statt 82 Meilen plötzlich 85 Meilen, ohne dass sie gefühlt was anderes tun. Das ist ja meine Aufgabe. Wir wollen das so nehmen, wie es ist und nur schauen, was durch diese Kombination passt. Für mich cool ist, dass wir halt diese Force Plates mit 1000 Mal pro Sekunde die Kräfte messen. Ich habe damals begonnen ja mit der Pressure Plate und mit einer, ich nenne es immer Summen-Kraftmessplatte mit der 3D Force Plate. Für Fitting ist das aus meiner Sicht auch ausreichend. Ist ja auch schon teuer genug, ist ja auch keine ganz so preiswerte Sache, aber sehr, sehr, sehr lohnend. Wohingegen, ich sage, wenn es ins Coaching geht, dann würde ich nie wieder auf die Dual Force Plates verzichten, weil ich sonst nicht weiß, was jeder einzelne Fuß macht, sondern nur, was in Summe passiert. Und ich weiß nicht, bei einem Drehmoment, ist es jetzt, weil der dies macht und das macht oder wie viel, was denn dort genau passiert, kann ich dort natürlich wesentlich besser eben erreichen. Der Druckverlauf als solches, also ob ich rechts, links, rechts gehe und wie, ändert sich oft im Fitting nicht so sehr. Die Kräfte wiederum sehr. Also wenn man das macht, ist aus meiner Sicht der Schritt Richtung Force Plates, auch der einfachen, in Anführungszeichen, das ist ja schon absolut High-End, Platte auf jeden Fall sehr sinnvoll. Ja, das sind so die Faktoren, die wir halt jeden Tag hier sehen, um halt dort reinzugehen. Ja, gehen wir nochmal in den Bereich rein. Putterfitting ist ein ganz eigenes Thema für sich, denn wir haben dort ja eben nicht die Power und die Kräfte. Ich habe jetzt auch 4 Kameras mit diesen sogenannten FLIR, FLIR oder wie immer die heißen, Kameras. Die ganz neuen Dinger, 300 Bilder pro Sekunde, tolle Teile, einfach mit einem Kabel werden die mit Strom versorgt und liefern die Daten, und zwar auch ein paar Meter. Anders als bei den reinen USB-Kameras, wirklich ganz cool. Und preislich auch dann wirklich hochinteressant mit, ich glaube, unter 500 € das Stück, glaube ich, meine ich, in dem Bereich. Down the line, Top-Down-Kamera, Frontkamera, Detailkameras auch für die Hände habe ich entsprechend noch da. Und wenn ich Putter-Fitting mache, geht es ja wiederum nicht darum, Körperbewegung zu ändern, sondern zu sagen, was macht eben der Putterpfad und die Schlagfläche, ist die ausgerichtet, wo geht sie lang, was passiert. Zusätzlich kann ich dann Handbewegung analysieren und im Coaching natürlich auch da ist die Balanceplate sehr wichtig. Ich sehe, dass beim Putten die meisten Amateure sehr viel Power machen, sehr viel aus den Beinen arbeiten, stehen alles andere als still, machen also eher mehr einen Schlag als einen Putt, auch für 2-3 Meter. Und ich gehe nochmal auf das Swing Catalyst rüber. Da können wir nochmal eben die Sachen rausnehmen, dass ich halt mit der von oben und der anderen Sache gut sehen kann, was passiert, was macht der Ball, geht er rein, aber vor allen Dingen wird er wieder quer ausgerichtet. Habe ich immer eine Kamera, die auf einem kleinen Stativ steht, kann ich dann drüber stehen. was passiert und wie geht es jetzt rein. Bei dem Beispiel mit dem Georg beim Putten haben wir es noch so gemacht, er hat mit seinem Standardstand leicht nach links gezogen. Wir haben dann den auf die Balance Plate gestellt und festgestellt, er ist zu 60% auf dem linken Fuß. Bisschen Schwerpunkt mehr vorne, Schlagfläche schloss ein bisschen. Er dachte, er wäre bei 50-50, fühlte sich für ihn so an, aber das wissen wir alle, das täuscht oft, wie wir das machen. Und das war jetzt ein Putt mit einem Hauch mehr nach rechts, den Druck. Und entsprechend war die Schlagfläche wesentlich besser, ein Hauch offen und wie bei 50-50 war es dann wirklich passend für ihn. Ja, und wir sehen halt bei Puttern oft, dass sowohl die Länge ausholen, Länge nach vorne, wie auch wie die Schlagfläche ankommt. Startet der Ball vernünftig, wir haben noch einen Quintic und noch andere Systeme dazu, aber allein mit diesem Darstellung kann ich schon sehr, sehr gut beurteilen, was passiert mit dem Ball. So, das soll es erstmal gewesen sein von mir. Was Fitting angeht, 3 Szenarien. Nur mit Video kann ich schon sehr viel machen, wenn ich weiß, wo ich hingucken muss. Mit der Force Plate sehe ich dann die Sachen, wo man sieht, oh, das sieht runder aus, ist ein anderer Rhythmus. Und beim Putten nutze ich eben auch mindestens 2, besser 3 Kameras, um zu sehen, was dort passiert. Ich mache das auf dem Putt-View-System mit anderen Dingen, dass ich da natürlich genauere Infos noch eben bekomme. Ja, und das soll es aus Nienburg erstmal zu dem Thema gewesen sein. Etwas mehr als eine Viertelstunde, aber das passt ja, denke ich, ganz gut.
Ich war bereit, länger zuzuhören.
Ja, das ist die Zeit. So war es vorbereitet. Ich könnte noch ein paar Stunden bestimmen.
Nein, das war gar nichts über insgesamt, was du weißt. Das sieht man schon. Das war kompakt, würde ich sagen, oder?
Ja, klar, aber es ist erstmal eine Hilfe, um zu sagen, ganz konkret, was kann ich schon mit Video machen, wo kann ich mal hingucken, gerade Kamera von oben im Übergang und unten Richtung Treffmoment. Und wenn ich nur den Droop mit der richtigen Kamera mal anschaue und wie er rechts-links geht, dann kann man wirklich auch mit ganz normalen Anlagen, auch als Golflehrer oder in dem Bereich schon sehr viel checken.
Siehst du dann Zusammenhänge zwischen, wo sein maximal, wie heißt es, Ladepunkt ist im Shaft, zwischen die unterschiedlichen Kräften? Gibt es da einen Zusammenhang? Einer, der sehr vertikal orientiert ist, neigt diese Art von Shaft zu haben, wo einer mehr rotiert, nicht?
Nein, überhaupt nicht.
Interesting. He said that there's not I thought there might be some kind of association between people that are very vertical tend to have a certain type of shaft, whereas opposed to horizontal guys are a certain way. He said he doesn't see any association at the moment.
Ja, wenn ich jemand habe, der sehr steil kommt, oft von außen offene Fläche, dann habe ich mehr Droop. Bei solchen Dingen passiert das durch in den Extremen.
Ja.
Aber natürlich, wenn ich einen Advanced-Spieler hier habe, der macht einen Fade, der macht einen Draw, der macht einen Hook, der macht irgendwelche Dinge und der schafft ja alles mitmachen. Da gehen wir hinterher auch eben hin, um zu schauen, was eben passiert. Und wo wird er wie beschleunigt, ist eigentlich das Thema, wo ich sage, wie die Hände wann, wo die Power reinbringen.
Ja, genau.
Und das kann ich sowohl mit dominanten Spielern, die horizontal, vertical oder Torque, wie auch immer sind, wie du das auch immer nennen magst, es setzt sich ja nur zusammen und landet dann ja oben im Schläger. Das wird ja durch den Körper noch ein bisschen verarbeitet und ist ja nicht 1:1 an die Füße gekoppelt.
Das stimmt.
All right, thank you, Martin. I think we will, we're getting near the time limit. We're supposed to go about an hour, but Ted, if you want to just have a quick introduction about kind of how you've used the plate and what you've learned from it. And then if we wanted to, I mean, I can go through a quick little example I have here of Francesco Molinari. James Ridyard brought his coach, and they were both in LA a couple of months ago. This is probably October of last year. And I worked with him a little bit, so we can talk through that, or if you want to just have a quick talk about your experience.
I would just tell people, because this is obviously a theme we have between Carl and I, because we talk a lot. The sales guy is, you don't want to überfordern. I don't even know what that is in English.
You can speak in German.
I'll say it in German. Du willst jemanden nicht überfordern mit so viel Wissen, so viel Technologie, der denkt, oh Gott, ich muss da 3 Jahre studieren, bevor ich das überhaupt anmachen kann. Ne? Und für mich sehr wichtig ist, dass du eine statische Ansprechposition hast. You got a static address position. Und dann du hast auch dynamisch. That means your feet can be pointing one way, but the torques inside your hips and knees and feet are actually in the out, and then that damit kann die Platte sehr gut damit umgehen. Und du kannst jemandem zeigen, so, wenn du dich so hinstellst, du hast eine bessere Chance von innen nach außen, oder du hast, wie du, like you said, mit der rechten Hüfte kannst du mehr Kraft auf der Innenseite aufbauen. All those kind of things that are just really, really important. And then if you understand, wenn du verstehst den Zusammenhang zwischen, wie funktioniert mein Schwerpunkt und wie ist mein Swing Direction. Wenn du das da verstanden hast, bist du wohl auf dem Weg, gute Fortschritte machen zu können. Und the most important thing for people to understand, okay, is I've been doing this a long time. So I'm going to tell you about the glory days of coaching, okay? You got a guy sitting there, and he knows everything, and he's coming, and he wants to tell you how to give him a lesson, okay? So about 15 minutes into this, you realize he doesn't know, has any idea about what's going on in his golf swing. So you start telling him. At some point, it becomes, I don't want to say an argument, but a discussion about what's happened. So now you got to bring a third guy in there and say, hey, when he gets to the top, can you tell him what's happened there? Yeah, that's happening. Is it really? So when video came along, it saved us so much time, because we're saying, hey, there it is, baby. You look at it black and white. You see it? Okay, you got it. So it was easier to get that guy online with what you're seeing, what you're able to translate. Now, let's take that a step further. Now you're sitting on a balance plate, and this guy's trying to hit a golf ball. He doesn't really knows what's going on. Why is my foot end up here? And when you can show him the swing and show him this is the reason why you toe your shots, and you can start to show him the pattern. So you don't load your left foot well enough to where you can reach the ball. All kinds of interesting stuff like that. You can really get people on board to where you don't have to explain so much to them. You just show them, see if you were there. Yeah. And one thing that I think is very important, and I use video a lot, just to video somebody's practice swing. Because I said, look, don't forget it. In German, it's called Probeschwung. It's the thing you're trying to do. You eventually become that what you try to do. And if you can show somebody with the plates, hey, look, if you're doing this, look how it changes the tendency. You've got more proof to them. Now they've got something they can work towards. And when they start to see the difference, trust me, I'll tell you something, that's the definition of motivation. You don't, it's too many people are too much concerned about what the ball's doing, which obviously is what we play golf with. But when you're teaching somebody and trying to teach them, convince them this is the direction we need to go, and you've got some really solid data there combined with their swing, you're going to be able to do a lot of damage on the driving range. You're going to help a lot of people, and the word's going to get around, hey, man, this thing, I thought it'd be complicated, but it is really, really cool. That's what I would say to anybody who's listening to this seminar. If you don't believe me, come see me.
That's great. That's great. Martin, could you give me the host rights back here, and I will just share my screen. We'll go through a quick quick video, or just show you a quick there we go. Perfect. A quick case study of Francesco Molinari. Let me end that and go here. So this was, I don't know, and this is something, you know, Ted, it'd be interesting, and Martin, to hear your feedback on this, but this was Francesco's first a couple swings when he came in, and he was, you can see he was losing the ball significantly off to the right, you know, 47 yards offline, carrying at 285. You can see the club dynamics, clear that face was just wide open. I don't think we had enough markers on the face to actually see the face, but the path wasn't so bad. So it was a pretty wide open face. And you could see the ground reaction forces. And one thing that he told me is, and I know a lot of people have seen him doing that kind of vertical force drill at the Masters a couple of years ago. Remember, he was trying to like jump at it as he was hitting it. And if you look at the timing of his forces, they're not very good, because you can see his vertical force peak is timed after the ball's gone. And so he was, so we know, as Ted would probably inform you of, that forces have to come before motions, right? We need forces to come into the system first. And so he was costing himself a lot of speed and not allowing that club to turn the corner and square up by having these forces so late and being mainly a, you know, working on all this vertical force. And his coach, James Richard, told me that they wanted to get rid of this vertical force because they think it caused an injury that he had. So he was off the tour for a little bit with an injury, and they think it's because of all this kind of jumping move that he's done to it. And so we did some testing with him, and we gave him some torque drills. So our goal was trying to increase his torque. And so if you're interested in some drills that you can use to affect all three of these forces, There's a lot of that information in our level 2 certification class, which is available on the Swing Catalyst website. But we gave him one of those drills, and after a few drills, this is what he ended up with. So you can see now the club information, his club's now moving 117. The ball's now only 26 feet offline, a little draw. He's able to square the club a lot better. You can see he's carrying it 302, and his torque went up. So you can see his torque went from, what was it here? It was 96 foot-pounds of torque, or 164% of his body weight, and it went up to 172. So his intention was to produce more torque, and a side effect of that was we actually produced more vertical as well, and we had it much better timed. And so you can see the timing of his swing now. That vertical force is now timed before the club gets to parallel in the downswing, so before P6 if you're a P system person. So now he's actually using that ground reaction force to speed up the club, allowing the club to turn the corner and square up. So this was an example of, and we had this side effect of more vertical force, even though we weren't even trying to get it. And so it's interesting how, you know, different drills work in different humans' bodies. And this was not something we were trying. We were trying to increase torque, which we did. We had a side effect of better vertical timing and actually more vertical. And then obviously, you know, how do you decide whether you're moving in the right direction or not? You got to look at what the launch monitor tells you, right? You can see the club numbers, you can see the ball flight numbers. All of those things tell us that we're probably better on the right track. And if you want to have a look, we can play the swing here. What do you see in this, Ted?
I was going to say, can you show me the first swing in P6? I want to see something.
Sure. All right. And then the first one. So we want to go to P6 of the first one. Whoops, missed it.
Yeah, you see to me, the big difference is you can see, look where his knee and his hip are. In the second one, if you were going to try to jump, that is a pretty lousy position from your foot to your knee to your hip to actually produce vertical force. And if you go into his see how he's got a lot more weight on his back foot, he's pushing much more. And you go into the next one, you got a much cleaner line between there. So he's got a much cleaner line. So he's going to translate a lot more power if you look from his foot up to his knee to his hip. He's going to be able to drive it straight up into his hip, which obviously is going to make it go up in the air. So you're using the angle in this case that you've got the leg set into to be able to manipulate your hip. A lot of people, there's two ways to manipulate your hip. You can either use your muscles in your butt and your hips to yank it around, or you can actually use the leverage out of the ground, these angles here, and then you're getting a much more efficient motion.
Right. Yeah. And that did, I mean, obviously give him a much different torque value. So he's producing a lot more torque on the ground. And that's something that, you know, your skilled eye can see some differences in positions here. I struggled to see a lot of big differences in positions, but I can definitely see some differences in the forces. So that's where if I recognize anything that's similar to mine, I figure it's bad. So then I say that must not be very good. That's good. That's good. I like it. So that's great. I mean, I think that's something that, you know, I think with the technology, you might be able to get a lot closer to doing what Ted does without having spent, I mean, how many years have you spent on the range teaching, Ted?
I started in 77.
70, that's when I was born.
Was it really? I can tell you it was a very nice summer. I was in Göppingen. I used to give lessons to beginners and to people just, you know, in the summer, obviously, for free. I didn't take any money, obviously. I was an amateur. But that's when I always enjoyed teaching people. And I had a very good pro then who taught me a lot of stuff. But I always knew, and I've been what they call a bunte Hund in German, because Germans are very much into swing planes and where the shaft is and all that stuff. And I was always about, to me, there's three things you got to know about the golf swing. Your body's predisposition to do things. If you can get it in angles and positions that it works in that way naturally towards what you're trying to do, okay, then you're going to start creating power and positions and space. The next thing is you got to use the space. How do I use the space to create the kind of shot that I want to hit? And that's where, for instance, TrackMan helped you out to measure that kind of stuff. And nowadays, you get on a force plate and it can prove it by saying, hey, you're producing a heck of a lot better power. And if you don't even care about the power, start looking at the trace of where the center of gravity is moving around and see it's efficient. And there's different traces. And I think at some point at level 6 of this thing, you'll go into, you know, traces and stuff like that, because sometimes if somebody's got what's called a Z trace, which is the guy's moving up and around like that, he's creating a lot of energy. Long drivers, guys, are like that. If you're able to keep your center of gravity moving in, then stays very much clean, you're going to be a guy who's going to be pretty straight. You're going to hit the ball out of the middle a lot. If you understand all of that kind of stuff, then you're able to kind of figure out, okay, where is this person and where do I go? Which direction do I got to go to? Because too many people get wrapped up in trying to get somebody to swing the club the same. I'm of the opinion, let's see how their body can work. And don't forget, the guy might come from hockey. He might come from tennis. He's got all these motor patterns. You've got to learn to tap into these motor patterns that they can always use, or at least understand something to help them move it forwards in golf, instead of saying, well, you know, you don't see any yellow balls around here, so obviously you are not going to be using your tennis motion. Well, I hate to tell you something. He's got a right form that sticks up to here, okay? So I would be using that right form if I were you.
That's really great information. That I agree 100% with all of that stuff. I think we are about out of time, but I would really like to thank you guys. I mean, there's been some great information here about how to use the force plate in teaching and coaching, in fitting. And I kind of tell people, you know, 10 years ago, there weren't many TrackMan's foresights. You know, not many golf teachers owned those. Now I don't know a golf teacher that doesn't have a launch monitor. And I think, you know, 10 years down the road, I think it would be pretty hard to keep up and teach without these ground reaction force plates and these pressure plates, because they just give you so much information that you just can't see with your eye. Like you talked about, Ted, you get much better buy-in from your players if there's data to support what you're trying to say versus just your own opinions. Super powerful. And I think with really smart minds like yours, like both of yours, collecting data and starting to learn new things, the sky's the limit in terms of where these things will go in the future. And I'm super excited to go down this road with you guys.
One quick note to anybody who's listening, I'll say this in German. Es ist auch gut für die Jugend, wenn sie jetzt von vorne anfangen, wissen, was ist Swing Direction, was kann Swing Direction beeinflussen? Oder zum Beispiel jetzt, what's my center of gravity, what's center of pressure, über center of mass. Wenn Kids aufwachsen mit dieser Information, es ist nicht mehr technisch. Verstehst du? Ich meine, es gibt Leute, wenn ich 5 Zahlen im Kopf, die dreistellig sind, schnell im Kopf rechnen kann, die sagen, wie kannst du das machen? Well, I grew up without a freaking, you know, before there was a calculator, I had to do all that stuff in my head. What I was getting at is, if you take kids into this stuff early, it just becomes second nature like the handies are, and they understand the information. A lot of people say, oh, this is information overload. Well, I don't really think it is, you know, because there's certainly a lot more complicated things that we have in our daily life that people that, my mother's 86, she can use Facebook. She knows how to use WhatsApp. You know, I mean, that stuff for her was probably harder to understand than some young kid's going to be, oh, look, this is your center of pressure now.
No, I agree. And just giving it to them in a way that they can digest it. And that's what, you know, the art of coaching comes in. We got to make sure we give them the data. I mean, obviously you talk to your 86-year-old mother differently than you talk to a young kid who comes in for a lesson. So that's where the art of coaching.
Very similar.
And even and even with technology, you know, it comes down to the expert translating it in a way that we can use it, because obviously, yeah, we don't want to overload our students with too much information so they lose the ability to be athletic. And we have to remember that, you know, this is still a sport, so we need to try to be athletic when we're and I think, like you said, Ted, using their past athletic backgrounds and making sure we don't try to overload those patterns with brand new patterns, which are going to be really hard to learn. You know, let's just try to work the way that they're moving into their swing and make them the most efficient we possibly can. So exactly. Gentlemen, I would love to stay on and chat some more, but I think we are out of time. For those of you who are very interested in other Swing Catalyst information, we have lots of other webinars up on our website. So if you go to the Swing Catalyst webinar website, you click on the webinar tab. I believe last year we had Mike Adams, Sean Foley, George Gankis, Martin was on there. If you want to hear some more about Martin talking in English that time, I believe it was. We had Tony Ruggiero and Lucas Glover. We had Bernie Najar. We had Kyle Berkshire on. Lots of good content up there. So please go there and have a look at that. And also, if you're interested in a lot more of our education materials, there are, under the Learning tab, there is a level 1 and level 2 certification that you can go through and learn a lot more of the information that we currently know, but we're learning new stuff all the time. with the help of two smart guys like we have on this webinar. And we hope to have a lot more good information for you in the future. Thank you guys, very much appreciated for your time. I'll let you guys get, I'm sure it's, they call it happy hour in Los Angeles. Remember, Martin, we had our little happy hour there at, back when we were allowed to hang out and travel and stuff, but I'll let you guys get on to that.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great evening.
Enjoy the bad weather in California.
I will. It's 25 Celsius and sunny here, so not too bad.
And the greens are running fast.
Hard and fast for sure. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye now.
Thanks, everybody. Warten alles Gute. Wir hören voneinander.